In the still of the night, Norma was roused from sleep by the chilling sensation of fingers grazing her bare skin. As the fog of sleep lifted from her mind, the dim light bulb hanging overhead revealed a figure she had come to dread, her stepfather, standing silently beside her bed once again, ever since her mother passed away. His late-night visits had become disturbingly frequent. Whenever he returned home reeking of alcohol, her room was always his first stop. At first, she tried to convince herself it was grief, driving him grief and confusion. He'd slur her mother's name, confuse her presence in the shadows, and every morning he seemed to forget it ever happened. But tonight, something was different. Their eyes locked and she saw it clarity. There was no drunken haze, no confusion. He was stone-cold sober. A slow, cruel smile curled across his lips, confirming her worst fear. This was no mistake. Norma's heart pounded. "Daddy, please, leave me alone," she whispered, her voice trembling as she sat up in bed. "Don't call me that," he snapped. "I'm not your father." Before she could move, he grabbed her wrists. His grip was iron. "Open your legs. I promise to be gentle," he said through gritted teeth, the sinister edge in his voice slicing through the silence. "No, please," she begged, struggling against him, trying to free herself, but he was far too strong. When he realized she would not yield willingly, his demeanor shifted. "It's either you open up, or get out of my house right now," he growled, shoving her hard enough that she fell to the floor. Norma gasped, stunned by the sudden impact. The words hit her harder than his push. Where could she go? Her mother had raised her in isolation, no close friends, no extended family she could turn to. Her mother had been her world, her anchor. Now, that world was gone. Tears welled up in Norma's eyes, spilling down her cheeks as she clutched her trembling hands to her chest, still pleading. But he no longer looked like the man who had once tried to play father. There was no trace of guilt or hesitation, just cold, twisted desire, and a long-nurtured sense of entitlement. He had waited. In his mind he had been patient enough. Those nights he had pretended to be drunk, hiding his intentions behind slurred words and staggering feet. Norma now understood it had never been about grief. It had been a slow, deliberate game, a mask he wore to make his intrusion easier, but the mask had fallen. Izzy wasn't hiding anymore, and he wasn't going to stop. Finally grasping this painful truth, Norma wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Quietly, she walked toward her wardrobe, stuffing her clothes and a few essentials into a large bag, anything she could grab in a hurry. Her hands trembled as she packed, but she didn't stop. Her pleading continued as she dragged the bag to the door, hoping just once more that he would come to his senses. But when she turned to look at him, Izzy didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply turned his back to her, like she was no longer even human to him. Defeated, Norma stepped out into the night, tears blurring her vision, her heart pounding with grief and fear. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get as far from him as possible. She walked for hours, thoughts spinning in every direction. Her legs burned, her feet ached, and her eyes stung from crying. But she kept going. The world felt cold, empty, unsafe. Eventually, she turned a corner and spotted an uncompleted building, bare walls. No windows, half a roof. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, somewhere to disappear. She entered quickly, turning on the flashlight of her phone to scan the space. It was silent, abandoned. Safe enough for the moment, she laid her bag on the ground and curled up against it like a pillow. The concrete floor was cold and hard, but exhaustion took over. With her heart still heavy and her body worn out, she drifted into a fragile sleep. Dawn came faster than she expected, the light nudging her awake. Her back ached from the floor. She stretched slowly, and as her eyes adjusted to the morning, memories of the night before returned like a tidal wave. If only Mama were still alive. The thought pierced her chest. Her mother had been her shield, her confidant, her everything. Without her, the world had turned into a battlefield. She began to cry again, but this time, only for a moment. Norma knew tears wouldn't change her reality. She needed a plan. Her mind wandered to the path that had led her here. She had once dreamed of being a doctor, but after failing JAMB 3 times, she'd reluctantly chosen business administration. She had completed 2 years, then the nationwide university strike hit. 5 months of uncertainty and waiting. And during that long pause, life had stolen her mother too. Everything had unraveled at once. She sighed, her body now itching uncontrollably. Mosquito bites dotted her arms and legs, angry welts from a night spent exposed. The building had no windows, just open concrete frames. Bushes surrounded the site, buzzing with insects. It was no surprise they had found her. Standing up, she dusted off her skirt and looked around. If this place was going to be her refuge even temporarily, she needed to make it livable. She explored the building cautiously. It was a duplex, surprisingly spacious. Crumbling walls, unfinished ceilings, but still more space than she had expected. Slowly, she climbed the bare concrete stairs, each step echoing in the empty house. When she reached the top floor and glanced through a large, open section where a window should have been, Norma noticed something tucked behind the building, a shed. It looked smaller than the house, but surprisingly more intact, with a solid roof and walls that hadn't yet begun to crumble like the main structure. Without hesitation, she rushed downstairs and made her way to the shed. The door creaked as she pushed it open. It was shut, but thankfully not locked. A mix of dust, cobwebs, and the smell of old wood greeted her, along with the sight of tools scattered across shelves and in corners. Hammers, nails, rusting saws, coils of rope, empty paint buckets. It wasn't much, but it was dry, and hers for now. A faint smile crossed Norma's face. Thank God, she whispered to herself. I've found my own corner. Her plan formed quickly. She wouldn't just clean the shed, she would tidy the entire compound. Not just to make the space more livable, but as a gesture of gratitude. Whoever owned this abandoned property had unknowingly given her refuge. The least she could do was care for it. Her entire savings amounted to 62,000 naira. It wasn't much, but she decided she would start with that. Some would go toward basic essentials: soap, a small mattress, food. The rest she would invest in buying fruits to hawk. Selling fruit had been her mother's trade long before Ezzy came into their lives. Life had never been easy. They used to count coins to buy gari and beans, but Ezzy had changed all that tat first. He earned well, paid her school fees without complaint. Her mother had worshipped him, praised his name in every conversation, but if she had known what he would become after her death, perhaps she'd have fought harder to stay alive. Maybe she was turning in her grave. Shaking off the thought, Norma began to take inventory. It didn't take long to realize the entire building had been deserted for years. She walked from room to room, gathering equipment left behind by construction. Workers, some tools still worked, others were rusted and broken. She laid them out in what used to be a sitting room. Among the items, 2 old shovels, a rusted wheelbarrow with a cracked tire, several buckets, dull machetes, and a few brooms with scattered bristles. Still, they would do. She picked out the sturdiest broom and one of the machetes and began to work. The sun moved fast as she cleared the overgrown grass, swept the floor, and pushed out years of dust and decay. She worked until her arms ached and her shirt clung to her skin from sweat. By evening, hunger gnawed at her belly. Norma dusted off her clothes and walked to a small store at the edge of the street. With a bit of her savings, she bought a simple dinner, a loaf of bread, and a small bag of groundnuts. It wasn't much, but it was warm and filling. As the last bit of light faded, she returned to buy a couple of jerry cans, then fetched water from a nearby public tap enough to last 2 days. That night, under the moonlight, she bathed behind the shed, then changed into fresh clothes. The shed, now clean and organized, felt more like a shelter than a storeroom. She laid out her wrapper over folded clothes and used her bag again as a pillow, exhausted. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to prayers. In fact, the first: God, please keep me safe tonight, just like I found this place. Someone else might to end, they may not come in peace. And the second: please, don't let the owner return until I've found somewhere else to go. I just need time. With that, she whispered softly, Amen. And soon, Norma drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. Months passed. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. The once abandoned compound had now become her home. Every morning she would rise early, pick up her tray of fruits, and head out to hawk. She knew every street corner and familiar face by now. The work was tiring, but it kept her going and fed her. Each week, Norma would clean the compound, sweeping the floors, trimming the bushes, clearing out drainage channels choked with weeds. She used part of her savings to repair the broken wheelbarrow, mend a cracked bucket, or replace a worn broom. They were small efforts, but they mattered to her. She hoped that someday, the real owner would return and be grateful the place had not completely fallen apart. In her heart, she was content. She had food to eat, a place to lay her head, and peace, something that once seemed impossible. But peace, like seasons, does not always last. One sunny afternoon, Norma had just sold the last of her fruits. Her tray was empty, and her heart was light. She swung the tray to her side, humming and whistling as she walked home. At a nearby kiosk, she stopped to buy cold sachet water. But as she stepped out of the store, something caught her eye. A van was parked right in front of the compound gate. Her heart skipped. Without a second thought, she took off running. Her slippers slapped against the dusty ground as she burst through the gate. But inside, she froze. A man, tall, graying, likely in his 60s, stood in the center of the compound, giving instructions to a group of workmen. They all turned at the sudden commotion. The man narrowed his eyes. Young woman, who are you? What are you doing here? Still catching her breath, Norma stammered, Good evening, sir. This is my home. I'm just taking care of it for the owner. The man raised an eyebrow, disbelief plain on his face. The owner? I don't remember asking anyone to take care of my property. The truth hit her like cold water. This is the owner. Panic swelled in her chest. She quickly began explaining how her mother had died, how she had nowhere else to go, how she had found the shed and cleaned it up, how she had done her best to keep the whole place in order. But as she spoke, 2 men emerged from behind the house, carrying out her clothes, her bag, her tray, and everything else she owned. He had found out she was living there before she arrived. The owner had already ordered that her belongings be brought out. "No, please," she cried, tears brimming in her eyes. "Please, sir, don't throw me out. I wasn't trying to steal or damage anything. I just needed a place. I didn't mean any harm." The man said nothing. Then finally he asked, "Are you the one that's been cleaning this place?" Norma nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Every week. I even fixed the wheelbarrow and cleared the drains." But he cut her off with a wave of his hand. He turned to the workers. "As you can see, there's no need to cut the grass anymore. Come, let me show you some other places I want you to focus on." As he began walking away, he paused, dipped into his pocket, and pulled out a bundle of cash. 100,000 naira. He stretched it toward Norma. She stared at it but didn't move. "I can't take that," she said softly. "I didn't do it for money. I only wanted a place to sleep." Her voice cracked at the end. Seeing that she would not take the money, he turned and instructed the workers to escort her and all her belongings outside the gate. Within minutes, she was sitting on the ground, surrounded by her things. The gate closed behind her. Lost. Confused. Tears stung her eyes again, but she forced herself to think. What now? Where do I go? Her gaze wandered to the van parked near the gate. It was filthy dirt-caked windows, dusty tires, and a dry layer of grime over the bonnet. She glanced at her jerrycans. 3 of them, still full of water. An idea struck. She couldn't carry everything at once, so why not leave something good behind? As a final thank you, quickly she got up and began washing the van. No one had asked her to. She didn't know if the owner would notice or care, but it was the only gesture she could afford to give. She worked fast, her hands scrubbing and rinsing. By the time she finished, her shirt was soaked and her palms sore, but the van gleamed under the sun. As she bent to gather her things, a voice called out sharply from behind. "This girl, did anyone send you to wash my car?" Norma turned, startled. It was the driver. The driver began shouting furiously, accusing Norma of being a nuisance, his voice rising as he demanded she leave the car alone. His harsh words echoed across the compound, drawing attention. Within moments, the gate opened again, and out stepped the owner, Mr. Fay. "What is going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp. The driver stuttered an explanation, still worked up. "Sir, I just found this girl washing your car without permission. She's always trying to insert herself." Mr. Fay cut him off with a stern glance. "Why not show gratitude instead of shouting?" he snapped. "You picked me up from the airport in a filthy car, and now someone helps you, and this is your reaction." The driver fumbled for words. "Sir, I didn't mean it that way. It's just, we're here for site work, and the road is dusty. I knew the car would get dirty again on the way out." Mr. Fay raised a brow, visibly displeased. "And so, for what I pay you, don't I deserve a clean car no matter how many times a day it needs washing?" Without waiting for a response, he turned to the workers and said, "One of you, follow the driver. Go buy new wheelbarrows, hammers, wood, nails, whatever is needed. If we find any broken tools upstairs, fine, but I want this place fully stocked." Norma, hearing this, quickly stepped forward. "Sir, I actually found several tools when I moved in. Some were still good. The ones that weren't, I fixed. They're all stored neatly in one of the rooms upstairs." Mr. Fay turned to the driver. "Go and check now." The man hurried off and within minutes returned, slightly out of breath. "It's true, sir, she's telling the truth. The tools are all cleaned up and sorted." Mr. Fay looked at Norma again, this time differently. Then, without a word, he turned to the driver. "Call everyone out. I'm heading home." The workers began to pack up. One of them chained the gate shut and handed the key to Mr. Fay. They all gathered to wish him goodbye, and he stepped into the back seat of the van. The driver started the engine, then paused, switching it off again. Mr. Fay lowered the window and beckoned to Norma. She approached slowly, heart thudding. "Thank you," he said simply, "for keeping this place clean, and for repairing the tools." Norma smiled weakly, blinking back tears. "It was nothing, sir. I just needed a place to stay." But then, something completely unexpected happened. Mr. Fay reached into his pocket and pulled out a key ring. Holding it out to her, he said, "I'm continuing this building because I plan to hand it over to a church in 6 months. Until then, I want you to look after it." Formally, Norma stared at the keys, stunned. "I'll pay you 100,000 naira every month," he added. Her knees buckled. She collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed, sobbing in disbelief. Mr. Fay stepped out of the car and helped her up. "My name is Mr. Fay," he said gently. "We'll exchange numbers. I'll stay in touch. Please just take care of yourself while you live in the shed." And with that, he got back into the car and was driven away. Weeks turned into months. Norma carried out her responsibilities diligently. She swept the compound every morning, trimmed the grass regularly, and kept every room locked and clean. The tools were always well arranged, and any damage was promptly fixed or reported. She no longer hawked her fruits across the streets. Instead, she set up a small wooden stall right in front of the gate. There, she sold bananas, oranges, pineapples, and mangoes. It made her enough to supplement the money Mr. Fay sent every month. Each time there was an issue at the leaky pipe, a broken lock, or a worker who didn't show up, she texted him immediately. He always responded promptly, and at the end of each month, her account was credited without delay. For the first time in a long while, Norma was truly happy. She had stability, a roof, food, work, even savings enough to rent a place. When this project ended, yet something occasionally lingered in her mind. Why had Mr. Fay never returned? Why trust her so fully after only one conversation? She pushed the thoughts aside, reminding herself to focus on gratitude. But 3 months into the job, all those questions returned at once. Mr. Fay paid a surprise visit. It was a quiet afternoon. Norma sat under the umbrella over her small stall, peeling oranges for display. When the familiar white van pulled up beside the gate, her eyes widened. Mr. Fay stepped out, slowly scanning the compound. Everything was spotless. The walls had been patched, the drains were cleared, and even the garden space was beginning to bloom from the flowers Norma had planted in old paint buckets. He looked at her, smiling. Norma welcomed Mr. Fay with a warm smile as he stepped out of the van. Together, they strolled around the compound, inspecting the progress of the work. He asked questions, occasionally nodded in approval, and exchanged a few firm words with the on-site engineer. The compound was spotless, the workers were organized, and the renovations were on track. When the tour ended, Norma expected him to leave just like he did the last time, but instead, Mr. Fay walked over to her small fruit stall and took a seat. Off guard but eager to host him well, Norma quickly washed a shiny red apple and offered it to him. He accepted it with a quiet thank you and took a bite. They sat side by side under the shade, not speaking much at first. Norma attended 2 passing customers while Mr. Fay remained on his phone answering calls, replying to emails, or simply scrolling. But in truth, he was watching her, observing her grace, her discipline, her calm way of engaging with people. Eventually, he looked up from his screen and asked, "I remember you told me about how you became homeless the first time we met. But tell me, Norma, what's your plan after this project is complete?" Norma didn't hesitate. "I've saved enough to rent a small place near my university, sir," she said, her tone steady. "So when school resumes, I'll be ready." She continued with more excitement in her voice. "And before the project ends, I plan to buy a second-hand fridge and a new juicer and blender. I'll start selling fruit juice, soft drinks, and water to students. It will keep me going, and I won't have to hawk anymore." Mr. Fay listened intently as she went on. "I've also been doing some research on my phone. Fruits and vegetables do wonders for the skin, sir. If I can educate students and show them the real effects, they'll subscribe to my juice packages. Many spend so much money on skincare when nature already provides what they need." He nodded slowly, visibly impressed. "You've really thought this through." They chatted a bit longer about business ideas, school, and how she managed to stay focused despite everything she had faced. Then he stood, thanked her, and left for the day. But the next day he returned, and the day after that, and the day after that. Each time he found himself drawn back not just to check on the site, but to talk with Norma. At first, she felt a flicker of discomfort. What if he wants something more, she wondered, but every visit remained respectful. Their conversations were light, sometimes deep, but always appropriate. Mr. Fay never crossed a line. If anything, he seemed to genuinely enjoy the calm and warmth of her presence, and as they spent more time together, something subtle began to change, not in a romantic way but in a deeply human one. A quiet bond was forming, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and something even deeper that neither of them could quite name yet. Norma also began to learn more about Mr. Fay during their frequent conversations. She discovered that he had never been married, had no children, and despite all his wealth and travels, had no interest in getting married. He was a man who had spent most of his life building a business empire across continents. Yet behind the success was a quiet, solitary existence. Over time, the bond between them deepened. Even the site workers noticed. They affectionately began calling her Ogden, meaning the boss's child. One afternoon, in the 6th month of the project, Mr. Fay approached her with a gentle smile and said, "Get ready, Norma. Look good. I'm taking you somewhere in 2 days." She tried asking questions, but he gave no hints, just that small, cryptic smile. The next day, Norma spent a portion of her savings on a modest new dress and styled her hair with care. She wasn't sure where they were going, but she wanted to make a good impression. When the day arrived, Mr. Fay came to pick her up himself without his driver. Together, they drove into the city, moving through wider roads and higher gates until they entered one of the most luxurious parts of town. Finally, they stopped in front of a grand hotel. Norma's heart sank. The building towered above her, elegant and imposing. The atmosphere, the guards, the gates, it was all too familiar. She had heard stories before. A wealthy man brings a girl to a hotel. What else could it mean? As they passed through the gates, one of the security men hailed him. "Chairman, welcome back," he said with a salute. Mr. Fay, he turned to her with a chuckle. "He's such a funny man. I always stay here when I'm in town." But Norma could barely hear him. Her heart thudded. Her palms turned cold. Just as they were about to get out of the van, she turned to him, trembling. "Please, sir, I'm not that type of girl. I can't do what you want me to do. Mr. Fay paused, confused for a moment. Then he looked at her and said plainly, Norma, you're far too young for me. That thought hasn't even crossed my mind. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry, she mumbled. It's okay, he said gently. Come on. They walked into the hotel together. Inside, every staff member greeted him with a mix of reverence and familiarity, not as a guest, but like he owned the place, and then Norma realized he did. They entered a beautiful office tucked away. Behind a velvet-lined hallway, Mr. Fay walked straight to the main desk, the owner's desk, and sat down with ease. She hesitated, then sat at the guest chair, confused and overwhelmed. Her eyes wandered across the room. Polished floors, antique furniture, crystal lighting. This place is beautiful, she whispered in awe. Mr. Fay smiled warmly. I'm glad you like it because it's yours now. She blinked. What? He opened a file folder. The paperwork is complete. I just need your signature. Norma's jaw dropped. She turned to look behind her, almost as if someone else was supposed to be receiving this gift. I'm serious, he said with a quiet laugh. And then he began to speak, his voice deeper, slower. You remind me of myself, he said. I was born in prison. My mother was serving a life sentence for killing my father. She was pregnant when she was locked up. When I was born, they couldn't keep me in custody, so I was sent to my father's family. His face turned distant. They hated me for what my mother did. They treated me like dirt. Eventually, they threw me out. I slept outside, begged for food, but I never gave up. I made myself useful. I cleaned. I fixed things. I worked harder than everyone else. And slowly, with God's help, I rose. Norma knelt quietly, tears streaming down her face. I always loved this hotel, Mr. Fay continued, but I'm getting old. I've built enough. I had planned to donate all I owned to charity, but I also prayed just once that I'd find someone worthy, someone who would take care of this place. He paused. You're that person. Norma collapsed in tears, speechless. This was too much, too generous, too unreal. Mr. Fay helped her up and smiled. I'll mentor you for at least a year. I'll teach you everything about this business, how to run it, how to lead, how to build. From now on, you're not just Ajani or my daughter. And he kept his word. From that day forward, wherever Mr. Fay went, Norma was by his side. He taught her the ins and outs of the hospitality business, from operations and staff management to financial planning and guest experience. She listened, she learned, she grew. Later, with his help, Norma was enrolled in an online business management program at a prestigious university, not because Mr. Fay chose it for her, but because Norma finally chose it for herself. She realized the dream of being a doctor had never truly been hers. It had been her mother's, one of many African parents, dreams carved in stone. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, but Norma had found her path, and it had taken her through pain, survival, humility, and grace, and she was walking it with her head held high. Mr. Femi traveled the world for business, and every time Unma remained in awe of just how vast his empire was. The luxurious hotel he had given her first taste of ownership and stability turned out to be less than 5% of his total wealth. Over time, they no longer needed to explain their bond to anyone. They simply introduced themselves as father and daughter. What began as kindness had blossomed into a deep, unconditional relationship, one that neither of them had ever experienced before. Femi, who once declared he had no desire for a family, found in Unma the daughter he never knew he needed. And Nunma, who had known abandonment, hunger, and loss, found in him the father she had always longed for. She took care of him with devotionary, minding him to eat during long workdays, checking up on his health, packing his travel bags with careful precision, and standing by him during tough business decisions. She was more than a daughter. She was his anchor. As she grew older and her life began to blossom, it was Femi who walked her down the aisle. Her children called him Grandpa, and her husband called him Dad. He wasn't just part of the family, he was family. And when he passed peacefully in his sleep, the world lost a giant, but Unma lost her everything. In his will, he left 70% of his vast fortune to her. The remaining 30% went to various charities across Africa, just as he had always planned. Even in death, Mr. Femi remained the only man who had ever given Unma a home, a name, and a loved one that neither poverty nor time could ever take away. That asked for nothing in return. The moral of this story is simple but powerful. Value. People will always keep people of value close. Even the most heartless person will tolerate someone who brings them undeniable value. That's how powerful it is. Value cannot be ignored. Norma didn't know who owned that house, yet she cleaned it. She didn't wait to be paid, yet she fixed what was broken. She didn't shout for attention, but her quiet consistency echoed louder than any noise. That was her value. As long as she lived there, she made sure her presence meant something. And in the end, it did. In this life, the value you bring to the table is what will make you stand out. It's not enough to just submit a CV. How about attaching a thoughtful cover letter, or a simple portfolio showing why your presence should be non-negotiable? It's not enough to keep asking for help. What are you offering in return? Even if some people ignore you, not everyone will. the right ones will see you, and once they recognize your value, they will never forget it. So keep doing good wholeheartedly, quietly, consistently. That's how you shift your life. That, as Acts 20:35 reminds us, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Let that be your mindset going forward, and watch your world transform. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments. It's truly an honor to share these stories and connect with you again. I know I've been away for a while, but I'm back now, and I truly hope you're doing well. Just a quick reminder, I run a special storytelling community where I share a brand new, original story every Saturday at 6 p.m. West African time. If you'd love to be part of it, the link is in the description. It's just 2,000 Naira a month if you're in Africa, and $2 a month for the rest of the world. Thank you again for listening. Till next time, take care and goodbye.